as regular as we have them today. Besides, the period was characterized by industrial actions which further lengthened the queue and introduced more uncertainty to an already complicated process. Owing to this, some of us lost interest in the inaugural lecture series. By the time the Department of Economics translated to Faculty of Economics and Management Sciences, the idea of presenting an inaugural lecture was no longer appealing to me. It was not until the last inaugural lecture by my faculty that my interest was rekindled by a friendly chat with the 12th Vice Chancellor of the University of Ibadan, Professor Emmanuel Olawale. And for some of us who know the implication of having a friendly chat with your in-law, you will know it's not a chat. With this change of mind, it was easy for me to respond to the call when the dean and the head of department approached me to say it was my turn, that is, a Milokan, to deliver the inaugural lecture on behalf of the faculty. Let me therefore use this medium to appreciate them for nominating me. It follows, therefore, that today's lecture is about 2 decades overdue. However, I believe it is better late than never. Reflecting on my academic journey and the fact that inaugural lectures are supposed to showcase one's contribution to knowledge, I have settled for a title that bears so much in its simplicity. Shall we trade? First, the title best captures my professional activities and engagement in the last 4 decades or so. Second, on 2nd April, the so-called Liberation Day, the 47th President of the United States of America published what was called reciprocal tariffs, an action that provided another rationale for settling for this topic. The unilateral decision of the US, especially in the area of trade, without paying cost to the World Trade Organization, continues to rattle the entire world, even till today. Number 2 point is constraining the fact that 14th Ministerial Conference of the WTO is scheduled to take place at the end of this month in Yaoundé, Cameroon. It is important to ponder on the essence of this biennial jamboree. Finally, the lecture also noted the importance of regional and continental integration agenda. More importantly, I settled for this topic because we, all of us, are traders or are important stakeholders in international trade. In this community, we are mainly trading in knowledge and skills. Vice Chancellor, sir, you are the chief trader in this community where we trade in knowledge and skills. As individuals, we should pay attention to our activities and ensure that they are guided by rules and regulations at different levels. As firms and business owners, we should be able to answer the question, shall we trade? We should be able to relate effectively with our suppliers and buyers in different markets. Indeed, all stakeholder groups look up to international trade for different reasons. Consumers rely on international trade for lower prices, product varieties, higher quality goods, or value for money. Producers are interested in expanded market, economies of scale, cheaper inputs, diffusion of technology or technology transfer. Government benefits from higher volume of transactions, efficient utilization of resources, and higher tax revenue, and so on. Other stakeholder groups include importers, exporters, labor union, non-governmental organizations. It is clear that the labor force will vote for international trade that promotes more jobs, higher wages from productivity gains, and so on. Shall we trade? If our answer is yes, then we need to answer other set of questions. What shall we trade? Where shall we trade? How shall we trade? With whom shall we trade? Simply put, trade is the voluntary exchange of goods or services between two parties. In this lecture, free trade connotes exchange of goods and services across frontiers without or with minimum government-imposed barriers or restrictions. Trade by barter, international trade finance, exchange rates, terms of trade are essential and related terms that are not covered in this lecture. However, the Vice Chancellor has directed me to inform this august audience that they are available on demand once you pay the prescribed amount of money to the bursar of this university. The opposite of trade is autarky, or high degree of protectionism. The question that arises then is, shall we engage in free trade, or what degree or level of trade protection should we impose on international trade? Vice Chancellor, sir, the answer to this question is a policy decision. Although the basis of such decision is rooted in the economic theories, there is no doubt that politics also has an important role to play. Thus, whether we should engage in free trade or not is clearly a political economic decision. From the perspective of economics, the answer to the question, shall we trade, will undoubtedly lead us to an examination of trade theories and their implication for free trade policy. This is done in section 1 of this lecture. In section 2, we briefly examine the evolution of global framework for regulating international trade flow. Section 3 is on Nigeria's engagement with international trade flow. Section 4 provides answers to the question, what shall we trade? And Section 6 concludes the lecture and charts the way forward for trade to promote structural transformation of Nigeria. Vice Chancellor, sir, before we go on, let me present the key messages of this lecture. First, as earlier stated, we are all traders as long as we engage in free trade. However, if we have been trading over the years and we are getting poorer, it is logical to pause and ask the question, shall we continue to trade? A candid interrogation of the question may lead to the need to change strategy or check the qualities of goods and services. We may need to even add values to our goods and services in order to command the best price in the international market. Number 2, different trade theories support free trade. However, different assumptions behind all these theories must be carefully interrogated. Number 3, global framework for promoting free trade has been consistently biased against developing countries' interests. Number 4, commitment and implementation of the World Trade Organization Agreement on Agriculture illustrate the observed biasedness against developing countries. The observed bias cut across all the pillars of agreement on agriculture. An example that is glaring is the support by OECD countries to agriculture, which is about $1 billion per day, just support to agriculture. Number 5, the establishment of the WTO is a watershed in the history of the world trading system, in that it presents opportunities and challenges, but require more from developing countries, and hence the need to build capacity. Number 6, Nigeria has signed and continues to sign various agreements. Recently, the country signed an agreement with Brazil and comprehensive economic partnership agreement with UAE. The country also has a robust trade policy. However, all these are lacking in effective implementation. Number 7, abundant agricultural resources notwithstanding, our country is a net food importer. Net food imported in 2023 was estimated at about $4 billion. That's the difference between our import and export of food. Number 8, we cannot continue to do the same thing over and over and expect a different result. There is a need for a paradigm shift. To change the narrative, Nigeria needs to engage in A, capacity development rather than capacity building, and B, adopt value chain approach to transformation of the agricultural sector, and 3, support industrialization through trade. Vice Chancellor, sir, I quickly look at the theories of trade, and we examine 5 of them, though the first one is like a doctrine, I will explain later. Mercantilism is the first one, followed by classical trade theory, then neoclassical trade theory, new trade theory, new trade theory. They all supported free trade and chorus, let us trade. However, they have different implications for trade policy, for different countries, for different sectors. Although mercantilism has been dismissed by economists on theoretical and logical grounds, reminiscence of the balance of payment, balance of trade doctrine have managed to survive in the minds of average citizens and many contemporary politicians. The case of President Trump on reciprocal tariff introduced in 2025 is a case in point. Perhaps this beggar-than-neighbor policy emanating from mercantilist doctrine is more akin to the world of war than the world of peace. Mercantilism is a zero-sum trade approach support the use of trade policy restriction instruments to limit imports and to promote export. Mercantilism is concerned about the particular nation and careless about what happens to the trading partner. It is what is being referred to in this part of the world that any amori bagu or bamu nimuyo imi. The classical trade theory, on the other hand, calls for free trade, and this is based on effective specialization. Neoclassical trade theory sees a tariff and non-tariff measures that should be removed in order to promote efficiency, promote maximum production, and foster overall economic growth. The new trade theory provides justification for government intervention in the form of support to domestic industries and economies of scale. The new trade theory offers insights for policy to support firms engaging in international trade. It also recognizes the need to coordinate various policies in order to ensure policy coherence. So far, Vice Chancellor, sir, I have sketched the evolution of trade theories and highlighted their policy implications. We have seen that newer trade theories are closer to reality. The industrial structure can no longer be ignored. Consumers are equally important. Technological capability is crucial. I stand here to confirm that trade theory is quite different from trade policy in practice. Now we turn to global framework for promoting free trade flows. Why do we need a global framework for promoting trade? Simply put, mercantilism is in the blood of every one of us, every country, firm, and individual. That is, balance of trade doctrine, accumulation surplus, foreign reserve, and have managed to survive in the minds of average citizens and, of course, politicians. Without a global framework, we risk a race to the bottom. The first attempt to establish a global framework for promoting free trade flow suffered a setback when the Charter of ITO, the Havana Charter, was finalized and agreed and signed by 56 governments on the March 2024, 1948, at a conference in Havana, Cuba. However, it never entered into force because the US Congress failed to ratify it. The General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, which was meant to be a temporary agreement, became the main forum for trade issues instead of ITO. GATT was able to conduct 8 rounds of negotiation between 1948 and 1994. The 8th round of negotiations succeeded in establishing WTO as global framework where global trade issues are thrashed out. The establishment of WTO in 1995 was a watershed in the history of multilateral trade in the sense that it marked the beginning of a new paradigm in the world trading system. WTO features improved institutional reform, widening the scope of multilateral trading system by introducing new issues in trade, single undertaking, no longer a la carte, it is work and eat. And 3, rules enforcement through dispute settlement. Today, in this lecture, we focus on one main issue, and that is the agreement on agriculture, which is one of the new agreements. Other new agreements are shown in this slide. The WTO era constituted a paradigm shift and marked the departure from the concept of special and Trenchard treatment as tool of development to an instrument for provision of some adjustment rules. These include 1, more time for implementation, best endeavor clause to provide technical assistance aimed at ensuring compliance, and a focus on the least developed countries. All these developments in the world trading system created unprecedented capacity challenges for developing countries. These countries that hitherto depend on the crumbs under the table of negotiation through special differential treatment suddenly became members of the WTO and moved from being passive to active members. Reaction to the outcome of this negotiation were mainly at 2 levels. First, developing countries stepped up preparation for the negotiation of agreement on agriculture, which began early in 2000. And that also became part of the Doha Development Round in 2001. Vice Chancellor, sir, I'd like to say that I was involved in different capacities in the preparation of Doha Development Round of negotiation in the race towards a new WTO agreement on agriculture. I prepared some slides, some studies with a view to informing policymakers on the issue of interest and options available to Nigeria, Africa on agriculture. We analyzed different proposals that were on the table then. However, regretfully I stand here to inform you that 25 years on, the negotiation of AO are still in progress. No doubt some achievements have been recorded, and perhaps the greatest one is the elimination of agricultural resource subsidy in 2015. It is noted that the MC14, which is scheduled for Cameroon at the end of this month, may not be able to gain any influence on this. Second, countries started to explore other frameworks for promoting free trade flows. The surge in the number of regional trade agreements since the establishment of WTO in 1995 is an example. The number of regional trade agreements increased from 45 in 1995 and currently to 380 in 2025. This global phenomenon has been analyzed by Ogunkola 2004. The establishment of African Continental Free Trade Area in March 2018 is not unconnected with this global trend. In fact, AFCFTA was notified to the WTO on the 16th June 2025. Finally, Vice Chancellor, sir, trade liberalization can be pursued unilaterally. This can be motivated by different reasons, including the need to promote selected sectors' efficiency or to address structural imbalances in the economy, just as it was done in the case of the Structural Adjustment Program. Vice Chancellor, sir, Nigeria has answered the question, yes, let us pray. As the country has embraced trade agreements at all possible levels, multilateral, regional, continental, bilateral, even unilateral. Evidence of these commitments are presented in the slide. Permit me to single out UK DCTS. This is a United Kingdom Developing Countries Trade Scheme, which came into effect on 19 June 2023. I wish to say, Vice Chancellor Sir, that I'm a member of a team currently working on the impact evaluation of this scheme on Nigeria. Not commissioned by Nigeria, but by external agencies, in collaboration with the University of Sussex and my very good friend Andy McKay, Overseas Development Institute and IDS. All these agreements and arrangements appear not to have had any noticeable impact on the country's structure of import and export. Nigeria's trade structure remains virtually unchanged. The country is yet to achieve its desirable goal of structural transformation through trade. Nigeria's exports are dominated by raw and unprocessed products, mainly agriculture and crude oil and minerals. As shown in the figure above, they jointly accounted for 83.5% and 95% of total trade in the 1960s and 2024. The only transition recorded, as shown in that graph, was from export of agricultural commodities in the 1960s to crude oil export since 1980s. It is equally important to note that the market for Nigeria's export are limited, while the markets for Nigerian import are wide. Who are our trading partners? Figures 2A and 3B show that Nigeria's export market in 2023 is more diversified than the one in the 80s. In the 80s, EU and USA dominated the market by accounting for over 80%. And by 2023, this joint share has decreased to 47%. While market diversification is important in addressing external shocks, product diversification is also an important tool for addressing this inevitable phenomenon of international trade. As shown earlier, Nigeria's export market is dominated by crude and raw materials. Nigeria has developed a trade policy since 1991. The latest version was the one for 2020 to 2027, was justified on the ground that we live in a dynamic world, and this is more with respect to developments in the global trade environment. However, Ogunkola and NAGA 2007 noted that Nigeria's trade policy objectives have not changed significantly despite changes in the global trading system, especially with the establishment of WTO. Similarly, Nigeria's trade policy instrument, regulatory and institutional framework remain virtually unchanged. Thus, over the years, the country is clear about the role and place of trade in its development agenda. The crux of the matter is how to achieve these laudable objectives. One thing is clear: it is not sufficient to craft excellent policy documents. The corresponding strategies, meticulously implemented, are required. Vice Chancellor Sir, what shall we trade is a question that follows naturally. And Nigeria has comparative advantage at least in two sectors: services and agriculture. Permit me to note that trading in services should also appeal to Nigeria because of different parameters, including abundant human capital and relatively below financial sector and education sector. However, the levels of awareness are low within government and the private sector, and this can also be addressed. In sum, Nigeria has also engaged in services trade policy at different levels, but again, the main issue is the implementation. Now I turn to the case of trade in agriculture. Vice Chancellor Sir, permit me to use the case study of the WTO agreement on agriculture to expand on the theme of this lecture, especially on what shall we trade, as the sector is crucial to socioeconomic transformation of the Nigerian economy. The design and implementation of the three pillars of agreement on agriculture, market access conditions, domestic support, and excess subsidy are biased against the interests of developing countries, including Nigeria. In the market access pillar, tariffication was not only debt in the sense of resulting in higher than actual tariff equivalent of non-tariff barriers that prevailed in 1986-1988 base period. Tariff rate quota system and special safeguard measures were also introduced. Tariff escalation illustrates the bias. As shown in figure 4, our trading partner is interested in raw cocoa beans, which will be duty-free, and not processed cocoa beans, which will attract close to 12% tariff. On domestic support, the negotiators agreed that not all subsidy distorted to the same extent. Hence, a green box expenditure was created. Figure 5 presents the trends in green box expenditure by the US, EU, Japan. These three countries spent $315 billion and $284 billion on green box expenditure in 2022 and 2023 respectively. These are the money they use to support the production and trade in agricultural sector. Figure 6 presents support to agriculture by Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD countries. Again, this is close to $1 billion support per day. On export subsidy, Ogunkola noted that the implementation of export subsidy commitment by Nigeria's main trading partner are focused on rice, sugar, meat, beef, and so on. These are the products that we are importing from them. The good news is that WTO members agreed to eliminate subsidy since 2015. The foregoing shows that market access conditions for Nigerian agricultural export continue to deteriorate. Apart from tariff peaks, which are still significant in this market, tariff escalation, tariff rate quotas, invocation of special safeguard measures, not only constrain agricultural export, but also frustrate its development. Dirty implementation of agreement on domestic support and high level of excess subsidy in these markets are clear indications of lack of willingness by developed countries to liberalize their agricultural sector. Nigeria and the WTO agreement on agriculture. Some of the characteristics of Nigeria's engagement with international trade include: 1. The Inaugurallecture trade agreement were held between 1986 and 1994, and the economic reform in Nigeria, the popular South, was also in 1986. Thus, the country embarked on both unilateral and multilateral trade reform in parallel sessions. However, they were neither coordinated nor referenced. Indeed, they were treated as two unrelated programs. 2. Nigeria has dated legislation on so many things. The case of anti-dumping and countervailing measures is an example. We still have in our statutory book the Custom Duty, Dump and Subsidized Goods Act of 1958 in the year 2026. Efforts are still going on to establish Nigeria International Trade Authority, of which anti-dumping and countervailing measures that are WTO consistent is promised to be included. Effectiveness and efficiency of import prohibition policy, as used by Nigeria, have been analyzed by Ogunkola in 2009, and that was during the faculty lecture. Government loses revenue. In addition, the policy is not effective, as banned items are often find their way to the Nigerian market. It has been argued that import prohibition contributes to greater food insecurity, reduce customs revenue, lead to food inflation. But all this must be put side by side with the potentials that we have in this country. From the foregoing, it is clear that Nigeria made very little commitments in agriculture. Hence, implementation was limited to notification of changes in existing policy environment. Evidence points to lack of capacity and lack of resources, but rather lack deliberate policy as the main determinant of the commitment under trade. Mr. Vice Chancellor, sanitary and sanitary standard, SPS, and technical barrier to trade is another constraint that we have. Again, while these are designed for protection of human health and so on, Nigeria is a member of some of the international standard setting organizations recognized by the WTO. Effective participation in these organizations are constrained by lack of resources, mainly financial and material constraints. Thus, the country has not been able to play any significant role in international standard setting, even where its own interests are directly affected. With respect to SPS, given the characteristics of Nigerian farmers, dominated by peasant and small-scale farmers, SPS measures are hardly understood and are difficult to meet. This is contained in the Ogunkola and Bankole 2000 study. The problem is compounded by lack of mutual recognition of inspection and standards, giving the rise to delay and unprotected trading environment. Finally, Mr. Vice Chancellor, let me point our attention to the paradox that we have in Nigeria. The 46th University lecture delivered by my very good friend, Professor Hide, on paradox of human behavior was a reference point here. It is indeed a paradox that Nigeria, with abundant agricultural resources, is a net importer of food and agricultural products. The country's arable land is grossly underutilized. In addition, agricultural productivity is very low, mainly because of the crude practice of using hoe and cutlasses and waiting or praying for the rains to come. Investment in the sector is low, and so is productivity and output. These partly explain the net food importing status of Nigeria. Nigeria continues to be a net importer of agricultural products. We import of agricultural product of 6.4 billion in 2023. The value of agricultural export in the corresponding period was just 2.4 billion. That is a net food import of $4 billion in 2023. That's the figure we have on the screen. Summary in conclusion. Nigeria is here to imbibe trade policy as a strategy for promoting economic development, as the country is here to utilize available opportunities in the new trade order to develop the economy. Binding agricultural tariff uniformly at a very high ceiling neither reflects sub-sector priorities nor provides a clear signal to would-be investor in the sector. Similarly, committing to no domestic support neglect the structure, characteristics, and problems of the sector. While it is desirable for Nigeria to pursue the liberalization of the sector in the next round of negotiation, it should also seek to leverage in the use of support services to address structural problems that limit supply response. Finally, the country must seek improved market access conditions for its agricultural output in view of the contradiction between the agreement and the implementation by major markets. How to make agricultural trade policy promote sustainable transformation? Vice Chancellor said, as I begin to round up this lecture, I must highlight some issues that need to be addressed for trade in general and agricultural trade in particular to have desired effect on sustainable structural transformation of the Nigerian economy. First, we need to move from capacity building to capacity development. Writing on capacity constraint of Nigeria, Ogunkola 1999, Ogunkola and Ada 2007, note that the country's participation in the rivalry round and other round before it was constrained by inadequate understanding of the complexity of issues to negotiate, including the art of in-depth analysis, the implications of various proposals for its national interest, and a weak institutional structure for remaining on top of the development in the negotiation. We also drew attention to capacity building or capacity development issues that require reform for Nigeria's effective participation in the WTS, such as the need for Nigeria's existing regulation and legislation to fully comply with WTO provisions. We identify such areas as chiefs, rules of origin, government procurement, custom valuation, technical standards, sanitary and phytosanitaries, and so on. In addition, we also identified the need for new legislation and administrative procedure to handle issues relating to agreement on anti-dumping, safeguards, subsidy, and countervailing measures, among others. Beyond the analysis, I've also engaged in capacity development activities across the length and breadth of Africa. First, under the auspices of the WTO training program for Anglophone countries. Between 2001 and 2011, I served as resource person to the WTO program. The first 3 years, in 2001 to 2004, was in the University of Nairobi, followed by the next 3 years in the University of Swaziland and University of Namibia. It is one thing to train and develop the capacity of government officials. It is quite another to provide necessary complementary support for the acquired skill and knowledge to be effectively deployed. It is my candid opinion that we need to go beyond capacity building, that is short-term courses, workshops, and seminars, to capacity development by strengthening institutions, systems, and individuals so that they can adapt, innovate, and sustain their own development. In addition, we need to widen the coverage of the capacity development to include all identified stakeholder groups in international trade, both public and private sector. Apart from the executive, other arms of government, such as the judiciary, legislative, are hardly engaged at all. Vice Chancellor, sir, I've joined my colleagues to reach out to the National Assembly twice. First one was in 2004 in Jos, and the second was this Monday and Tuesday in Abuja. These meetings were organized by external stakeholders, not by our own government. The first one was done by Frederick Everstone, an Ghana NGO, and the last one by United Nations Economic Commission for Africa. These two arms of government should be more involved in the domestication of different agreements, and more importantly, in enacting new legislation necessary for effective implementation. A value chain approach to making agriculture promote structural transformation. Here, we look at value chain approach as a broad classification of activities and sectors. In the case of agriculture, starting from input supply up to when you get to consumption. Production is not complete until the goods have reached the final consumer. Priority attention should be accorded to post-harvest handling and processing of agricultural products, because post-harvest losses is estimated at about 30 to 40% of our production. Thus, a value chain approach suggests the following. First, a holistic policy view of the development of the sector. Hence, silo approach to policy design and implementation should be discouraged. Policy coherence is required so that all those who are involved are not speaking at cross purposes, but they are speaking with one voice. The importance of agricultural services in the process of transforming the agricultural sector cannot be emphasized. It is equally noted that many of the missing links in the sector relate to weak or absence of services. Industrializing through agricultural value chain. Beyond agro-industrialization, which may serve as first step and lay the foundation for industrial takeoff, industrialization through trade is an important strategy worth pursuing at various levels, but more importantly, at the regional and continental level. While policy space is shrinking, there are also rooms for trade policy to promote industrialization. Trade and industrialization are basically two sides of the same coin. This implies a bi-directional relationship in which industrialization facilitates trade and trade also facilitates industrialization. Hence, for effective trade-induced industrialization in Africa, structural transformation of industrial production and trade is a basic prerequisite. And these are the three critical points: producing and trading in intermediary, establishing and joining and upgrading along national, regional, and global value chain, and three, increasing the role of services in trade generally. Africa must imbibe the change from trade in products to trade in tasks and activities and promote increasing role of services in the process. Trade policy is crucial for effective trade-induced industrialization. National trade policy architecture and different activities in bilateral, regional, and multilateral trade negotiation across the length and breadth of the continent must be considered in giving priority to industrialization. In conclusion, let us trade as trading is good and promote structural transformation if properly directed. However, let us trade with purpose. However, let us note that on one hand, there is need for reform of global framework of free trade agreement. On the other hand, domestic policy reform with appropriate legal, regulatory, and institutional support, consultation, cooperation, and effective is very important. Acknowledgement, thanks to the God Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, it is by His grace and mercy that I'm here with you today. To my parents, though of blessed memory, I cherish them for the way they brought me up. My teachers at all levels of education, I appreciate you all. The Ishorumis, my late uncle Pastor Uli played an important role, not only in my education, but also in my upbringing. I also recognize all the Ishorumis that are in the hall. The Odeyemis to my own Pastor Odeyemi and the wife, and the entire family, words are not sufficient for me to express my appreciation. My teachers, supervisors, mentors, professors, starting with Professor Afolade Asoyode, whose sister here. He was my head of department and gave me admission to the department. Professor Samuel Olawale was my supervisor at MSc and my mentor through CF. I recognize Professor Akin P. Iwayemi and Mrs. Iwayemi not only as my PhD thesis supervisor, but as my landlord when I was in Nick. Thank you. Professor T. Ademola Oyede introduced me to international trade. I also recognize him not only as my teacher, but also as a patient mentor. Thank you, sir, for the opportunity to work with me. You're welcome. I cannot forget Professor Sir Chief Ibiagari, who is also another mentor in so right. He gave me so many assignments and paid for them while I was undergraduate. My colleagues in the department, my students at all levels, special committee for this lecture through Professor Oye Lawansi. Reviewers of this lecture, editors Patrick Edobo, Olatunji, Oladejo, and his team. Mr. Vice Chancellor, I also thank you and recognize that this is the institution that gave me the platform to ply my trade and thrive. Former Vice Chancellors, registrars, and former registrars that have passed through, I thank you very much. Collaborating institutions include FAO, NECA, AERC, London School of Economics and Political Science. The Ogunkola clan, you are highly recognized. Let me just use my uncle to recognize all of you. My in-laws, that's the Kolawole Oteniara clan of Ibukun. You are welcome. Thank you for everything. Our children, ably represented by Oreoluwa, thank you for always being wonderful in your dedication and understanding. And finally, to my guardian wife, I wish to thank my beloved wife, who I remotely together in the corner way, for putting the whole. Finally, to God all alone with glory and honor. That